starts anytime now.
How old are you now? Oh, you know what? Okay.
How old do you think I am?
I'm not
Come on.
61.
Not very good.
Are you 61?
62 in May.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was going to say 43.
Thank you. 43.
It's a good.
That's a stretch. 53.
We act like you're 19.
So I've got some buddies say you're the oldest 8-year-old I know.
You guys are texting me. Never mind. You guys are already recording.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Dave. When's Dave coming?
Whenever you want. Yeah, I told him. I think it was last week. I told him you can come anytime.
When made you guys start videoing? Weren't the first few just audio?
Yeah, like the first one that Alex and I did were audio, and then there was just a huge community outpouring for trying to do something live, and
To see your face.
that's kind of how it took off.
Very nice. I thought he turned this off. Oh, let's see.
Yeah, see that thing.
That's my friend Chad Gaither.
He's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on. Did you watch this show?
I didn't. I watched bits and pieces of it, but I didn't see the whole thing.
Yeah,
He's still into the hot sauce.
he is. Not as much as he used to be, but
Yeah, with a face like that. I hope he's listening.
you know that picture's after a 24-hour shift out at the concert.
Yes.
And it was brutal.
You know, if I would have known Tremblay wasn't going to be here, I would have ordered or wore a blazer.
Mm.
I mean, somebody needs a sport coat here when he's not here, right?
This is true. He comes in his full like shirt and tie most of the
Yeah,
time.
that's he's just a professional. Huh?
He is, yeah. He always wants to look
The
good.
consummate professional. Well, good for him.
You never know what she's doing back there.
Okay, that was good.
Yeah.
Sucking something.
Right. You know,
I can't get it over. Never mind. I don't want none.
We'll see how this feed works, and then I might have to pull this down.
Now, it's been a long time since I've done that.
Alright, I'll switch to disclaimer and then we'll go live.
Okay.
Any questions? Oh, there's no delay anymore either. Usually we did like a 2-minute delay before, you know,
Uh-oh.
in the event that like I don't know, Alex like falls and hits himself or something. And we took that away just because it was taking up a bunch of
Okay.
CPU space.
I'll try to keep it under control.
Okay. Oh, and then I'll do rapid fire. So
all right.
I hope you got some answers.
I'm not your guy. I'm a different generation, but
Well, do you watch Marvel movies or no? No?
I watch marvelous movies.
Oh, I'm going to ask you about Star Wars.
Oh, it's this, right?
Oh my god.
Star Trek.
yeah. That's he says. Hey, or the Star Trek movies.
Ready? Even my stomach's going. You can hear my stomach.
See, I think it's yours.
It might be. Is it that sensitive? How's the audio? Is it still good?
Yeah,
Yeah.
real good. You can hear every slurp, every bang of the table.
Alex breathes into his mic a lot that I have to edit out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this. So you'll see him do this in a way like turning away from his mic. Yeah.
Oh, we got another watcher.
Where are you seeing that?
Bill Davis, Alex Tremblay joined.
Over there?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. You ready?
Yep.
Here we go. Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Medic Assessment. I am Greg. I am your host tonight. As you can tell from the video feed on our live feed, Alex is not here tonight. However, we have somebody, well, two people, but somebody particular that's sitting in his seat right now. So I'm joined by two guests that I'm super excited to have here tonight that we're going to talk about some really, really interesting discussion topics, some interesting pieces of medicine that I think a lot of people don't know about. So before we get into those discussion points, go ahead and introduce yourself, Alex. I'm just kidding.
Yes, I'm very honored to be in Alex's chair. Nothing against you, Greg, but I'm a little bit disappointed. We had some things for Greg, but I'm Mark Tutela.
What's up, Mark? Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm super happy to have you here.
Good to be here.
You've been a big supporter of it since day one. You've been sending us a lot of texts and messages, and
Yeah, I was going to tell you. I'll tell you on the air. I had kind of a confession to make, and I was kind of scrolling through Facebook, and I came across that, and I went, "Wait a minute, that's Greg T. What are they? Holy cow, this guy's got a podcast." I'm like, "Oh, that's cute."
yeah.
And an hour later, I was done watching the whole thing. It was awesome. That was the Refractory VFib one.
Yeah.
It was a great job.
Yeah, that's a popular episode of ours, and we're gonna touch on that subject. I think again at a later date because, as we were talking about before the show, I think it's a huge part of medicine going forward. Anyways, our second guest tonight is Nick. Welcome to the show, Nick. Go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Thanks. I'm Nick Barrett. I'm also very excited to be here. A little disappointed in Tremblay. We brought him a helmet to wear, but
Should we show him the helmet?
Yeah, we for sure should.
If you can leave this here for Alex, then
Yeah.
we definitely should.
And I've got one for him he can have. I'm gonna get him one.
Let me see if I can put it right here for all of our viewers. See this? This is a real helmet.
Yep.
This is an actual helmet, not the helmets that are sitting behind Mark right now.
Right.
So,
It's got a nice visor, so he doesn't get his eyes poked out.
is this the actual one that he wore in the picture?
No, that's one of our mobile field force helmets.
Nice. Well,
Yeah.
again, yeah. Alex wishes that he could be here. He is presenting his thesis on mathematics.
Stuff.
I'm not sure. Alex, please tell our masses what you're presenting your thesis on tonight.
Oh, there he is, right
Yeah.
there. Hey, good luck, Alex.
We'll see how this feed works. We're doing a new program. In fact, I can already see that it's already kind of going down a little bit. So let me see if I can fix this. If people are noticing the feed being a little bit choppy, let us know in the comments, and I can quickly fix that. Anyways, so the topics that we're going to talk about tonight are tactical medicine. More specifically, SWAT paramedics, or paramedics that work on a SWAT team or in a SWAT capacity of some kind. So before we really get into that stuff, and before Mark gives us a big old history lesson, which I'm really excited to hear, I wanted to talk about the quiz that I put up. So I put up this quiz earlier this week, talking about an off-duty officer who subdues a suspect, a patient, and then you have two patients, essentially. So you have the officer, and then you have this particular suspect who is currently in excited delirium that goes into cardiac arrest. I don't know if you guys had seen that quiz.
Got it. Yep.
So what are your thoughts, and either of you can answer, on having two patients in a triage type scenario where it's only you and your partner, and you have an officer that's one of those patients? How does that change your treatment, if it does at all?
Well, this is a tactical talk. I don't think that would be particularly a tactical thing. I think any street medic can come across that.
Yeah.
I know on the tactical side, this was talked about years ago. You got one of your own down, and you got maybe a suspect down. What are you going to do about that? So, one of the thoughts is you have an officer that, especially on the tactical side, he's got a lot of munitions, he's got weapons and stuff on him. Taking care of him first might be the best option,
Sure.
just for safety overall. But looking at it as a medic, you got to go with what's as much as I'm going to want to be on that officer. And
Yeah.
stuff, you got to go with who's the most injured. And stuff,
Yeah.
So, yep.
Nick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So looking at that one, I look at it more of the officer can be sort of a buddy aid, self aid type situation now with that officer being decreased level of consciousness, more of a buddy aid situation. He's probably a pretty quick patient to at least stop the injury from being further by a tourniquet. And then, we can deal with him further, but with one medic, I think you do the initial on him, and then you move to the excited delirium that's in cardiac arrest, and you can move with him. So
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting, and I had to pull that feed down because the CPU is being used way too much, so I think the audio is going in and out. So
Sure.
just again, if you guys are noticing that, go ahead and comment or send us a message, and we can certainly fix it. We're using a new program tonight. So there's a part of me that wants to be on the side of, there's a part of me that is on the side of that. If I were to see an officer down, my attention is immediately going to him. It's a biased opinion of myself, with my own history in EMS and prior military service, but also you see a EMT or paramedic firefighter or an officer down in a scenario. I'd like to think that I would be unbiased, but I think we're all human in that regard.
absolutely.
But I was really happy to see that the community responded to that question by saying kind of what you said, which is, yeah, we would be biased in this predicament, but we have two patients. And there was a lot of really interesting discussion points that were made for that question.
Like what?
Well, that's what I was going to come back to at the end of our talk after we went through all of these topics that we were talking about. So, and you're already looking at your watch like you got to,
No.
yeah.
No. I just,
So before we go any further, Mark, tell us, what is a SWAT paramedic and what is the history of paramedics on a SWAT team?
okay, I can do that. Back in my day.
There's number one.
Back in my day. Yeah, so, SWAT in general, let me start there. SWAT in general, it depends upon who you talk to. There's a little bit of history there. Some people will tell you that it started in the 60s for sure. There was Charles Whitman was a guy who went up on a tower in Austin, Texas, and was shooting. He had a high-powered rifle, deer rifle. Cool.
Yeah.
And he killed about a dozen people and injured about 30 more. And the police were sorely armed for that. It was the revolvers and shotgun day. And so they went home and got their hunting weapons and so on, and mitigated the situation. More people believe that it really started in L.A., the Watts riots, and that's kind of historically that's what most people will say in the 60s. Again, law enforcement just wasn't prepared, as prepared as they could be for a situation like that, and things kind of grew out of those. And again, that's in the 60s. That's a long time before EMS really got involved. But in the late 60s, as far as I know, and into the 70s, EMS started getting involved. There was very few teams that had it, and a lot of it came out of, and the majority of it came out of Vietnam, medics from Vietnam, and a lot of the police officers at that time were Vietnam veterans.
Sure.
I know when I started in 1979 and 1980 with Minneapolis PD, and the majority of those guys were Vietnam veterans.
Sure.
And the same thing with like LA, LAPD, LA County, I think Miami, Dallas. A lot of those bigger cities had PDs, and they were Vietnam veterans, so they were used to being out there and having medics with them. So
Used to getting shot at.
Yeah, well, yeah, but as a medical support part of that. So that's what they did. I know some places like LA County, the medics were deputies.
Sure.
They were already deputies and stuff. So working both sides of the street. And I'll just talk locally. That's what I know the best. In 1979,
Guess how old I was in 1979?
I guess old.
Negative.
-6. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's going to come up. We've already talked about me being the dinosaur, and that's cool. And I on that part, I feel really fortunate. I kind of came in on the ground floor of it, and got to be a big part. I got to be a part of helping it get growing. Thames Tactical EMS.
Sure.
So there was just a handful of agencies, and we were approached. I shouldn't say that. Actually, a buddy of mine, who was a Hennepin County paramedic at that time, was approached by Minneapolis PD and said, "Hey, we're switching over from this, SOD, Special Operations Division, and we're going to start what they call the ERU, Emergency Response Unit, and we're going up to Camp Ripley to train, and we need to have medics on the ranges to train up there. Could you have some guys come up?" So I went up. He asked me to come up, and a couple of county medics went up, and it was just kind of, going up Ripley, and it was pretty cool, and we get to shoot guns and be part of that whole thing.
Yeah.
And that following year, in 1980, they switched over completely to the Emergency Response Unit, and the XO, executive officer at that time, Sergeant Art Hart, approached me and a couple guys and said, "Hey, there's some of the other bigger teams around the country have medics with them. Would you guys be interested in that?" And it's like, yeah, for sure we would. And so that was kind of the beginning, but we didn't know what to do. There was no textbook. We didn't know how to go about it. So
Was TCCC a thing back then?
No.
I don't even think that existed.
That didn't really start till the 90s.
I was going to say, the Gulf War,
Yeah. We can talk a little bit about that too, kind of how it's affected the tactical EMS.
Well, let's come back to the history, and let's touch on kind of the current day, modern day practice of how paramedics are working on SWAT teams. So, Nick, can you give us kind of a rundown of how that's working with your own experience?
Yeah. So, as for my experience, without Mark, we really wouldn't have had a clue what to do. When you look at tactical teams and teams specifically that use paramedics, it's such a huge variety of how things are done.
Yeah.
Even in our metro area. So some services will use medics and they'll, just stash them in the Bearcat or in their armored vehicle. Some will, integrate them and then leave them at the front door. And then when we started up in 2014, talking with Mark and with the command staff of our team, we felt it very important to try to integrate our paramedics in. And so we became a part of that team, integrated in fully, and felt that was the best model. With that came a lot of trial and error.
Sure.
We worked, many different trainings trying to realize, what's the best way. We tried it both with us integrated in fully and then dumping us at the front door. And we quickly realized that really what's best is to have us integrated fully in. So we become part of the stack, as you will, or the group of guys going in.
Yeah.
I guess I should say guys and girls, really.
Yeah.
But so we're part of the team. We integrate in. One thing that Mark had taught me early on was you find work. And that's a motto that we live by in our tactical EMS.
Yeah.
The last thing you want is to have operators, team leaders feeling like they need to babysit the medic.
Right.
And if you can do that, and you can integrate fully in there, and you don't have team leads and operators feeling like they have to babysit you, that's the perfect situation.
Yeah.
We realized quickly in some of these trainings, when we would go into some of these bigger buildings and you get deep in there, if you're not with them and they encounter a casualty and them trying to guide this medic in there, it's worthless.
Yeah.
So, we found that really to get the best performance out of the Tacto medics, we had to be part of the team.
Yeah.
Again, throughout the metro area, throughout the country, there's countless different ways of doing it. And not that I'm saying ours is the exact way to do it, but
Mark is watching the video, and now he's got to turn. You can watch it. That's what Alex does. You got to turn it all the way down. Yeah. Sabrina says hi, by the way.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hi, Sabrina. So not that our way is the best way, but for us it's the best way.
Yeah.
And that was done through trial and error. I feel like talking with our commanders, that really, that was the most comfortable for us. Mm-hmm. It certainly is a shift in our thinking as paramedics. We don't typically go into those type of situations. We wait for the all clear or for a scene as safe. So going into a situation like that is completely against what we've been trained to do. And
sure.
With the years of experience that I have, it was totally different. So
yeah.
One of the things.
Go ahead.
We're talking about getting in the stack and going in and stuff, and kind of the reality of it. And I'll talk to medics that want to get into it and so on, and that's great. Yeah. I'd encourage anybody and stuff, but it's just. And I think you'll agree. It's just not as sexy as it sounds.
Sure.
It's cool, and you watch the TV shows and stuff, and every other scene is you're running into a hail of bullets, and really, truly, tactical EMS is probably about 95% training.
Yeah.
Doing ambulatory care and training, putting Band-Aids on, and giving
preventative care.
Preventative care.
Yeah.
Taking care of those things. It really is. I mean, it's. I've always said in schools and teaching and stuff, the medic's job is to make the tactical operators the most efficient and effective they can be.
Yeah.
And it's not a sexy thing.
It's a support role.
Yeah, it really is a support role. We're medical support, and we, another part is just like you say. Ambulatory care, kind of babysitting sometimes, there's a little bit of nutrition. I know one of the articles we looked at was nutrition and hydration and just taking care of it's kind of like being a trainer on a team sometimes, like a sports team. These guys are nowadays, especially nowadays, they're like athletes and stuff too. You got to take care of them. And there's a very small part of the trauma care and the big part of it. So.
Yeah.
So how has the medicine changed now? Now you've been doing it a long time, Mark, and I gotta imagine that the medical side of it and actual treatment during first contact, like in TCCC, for instance, or in your roles, that has to have dramatically changed over the course of 30 years as to what we are doing today. I mean, OEF 1 and 2, for instance, the war in Iraq has taught the medical community a lot about trauma. And what kills people in the first minute, what kills them in the first 10 minutes, in the next hour, and so on and so forth. So there's been a lot of advances in terms of the actual medical treatment that we do in trauma. How have you seen that changed over the course of your career?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or I guess another question to add to that is, how has it stayed the same or gone back to it?
Yeah, well, it still is the same. It's still your 95% of what you're doing is just kind of taking care of these guys. But as we learn, as we go along, and that's why I've taught schools and taught a lot of medics in it and stuff, and helped teams get started because we've made all the mistakes way back then.
Sure.
Not a lot of the day-to-day stuff has changed, but absolutely, TCCC was huge. Both tactically and on the street. The military has just done spectacular stuff trauma-wise since the mid-90s. But again, another thing too with tactical EMS, it's still medicine. It's still pre-hospital medicine.
Yeah.
It's still a paramedic or an EMT or a physician or a nurse. There's all different disciplines on teams. And it's just in a different arena.
Yeah.
It's in a more austere environment. It's taking what you do as a medic or a critical care medic and just putting it into a different arena.
So one of the things, and I'm going to give it to you here, Nick. One of the things that we see very often, unfortunately, in 2018 is the active shooter. Right now, you alluded to kind of how that started 30 years ago, but it's becoming a more and more unfortunate reality of our country, of the world, and EMS services have had to respond appropriately to that in their training. How is that training in the EMS service that you work for and the SWAT team similar, and how are they different?
Well, so, I mean, depending on where you're at, there's a number of different programs out there that train for active shooter. And it's all great. It's all, kind of based along the same, basic portions of it. But as far as SWAT doesn't really become a big part of active shooter just because of time to mobilize a SWAT team. They kind of fall in later in time. So the big part of active shooter becomes a key part of the initial response. So you have your initial officers who respond, and research will show you that these threats are stopped by the first incoming officers, whether it's that the officer engages them and shoots and kills them, or the suspect is encountered by an armed officer and they decide to end themselves at that point.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's like 95%. It's a crazy high number, or high percentage of people that the threat is ended at first contact. Now with a number of these trainings that are out there, they've started kind of changing that thought process of paramedics, first responders, firefighters, any medical responders really that respond to the scene of these active shooters. And we in this article that we had looked at before, they talk about rescue task force or rescue teams. And basically you have, maybe a couple medical personnel that go in with a protection crew of police officers. Sometimes it can be as little as 2 or 3. And they're going into what we are not normally going into. And you're going in and taking out these people that are injured, saving lives while there's still an active threat in the building.
Sure.
Meanwhile, there's officers that hopefully have addressed the issue and maybe at least have them pinned down to a certain area of the building. But you look at a lot of these situations that you're seeing now, Florida, for example, and how these threats are evolving. You look at Virginia Tech where the guy barricaded and chained the building. So they know what that threat is that's going to stop them, and they're trying to stop that.
Yeah.
So
What?
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when you think back, and again, this was when I was very, very young. I still remember seeing it on the news, but when Columbine happened, and I think it was 1998, that tragedy had happened, looking back on it now, and again, none of us are police officers. Mark went to school for law enforcement, but none of us are.
But I'm a medic.
None of us are officers. The tactic back in the day was surround the building and wait. And as you alluded to now, that's completely changed, and it's taken unfortunate events to teach the American community, the American public safety community that. But it is, it is a different tactic than what we did back in the day.
Yeah, Columbine was kind of a landmark. That was kind of the line in the sand. As they realized at that point that they can't, just what you were saying, is make a perimeter and wait for the tactical teams to show up.
Yeah,
need to go in, and things have changed. They made changes. They had a lot of training after that with street patrol officers, and they would go in teams and hall bosses and diamonds and T's and stuff. And they've changed since. And they've like Nick was saying earlier, he's like, we've found that 95+% of these will either end it themselves, or it's mitigated by a police officer going in. And now it's, if you're a police officer, you show up on the scene, you're the first one there, you go in, you go to the sound of gunfire, and that's that can be tough sometimes, but that's how it's taken care of nowadays.
And that's what the officers sign up for. That's their job, and. So can you talk a little bit, Mark, about the current training that's done in not the SWAT teams, but the current just the regular EMS services? They're training that paramedics receive to assist in those active shooter situations that might occur in
Yeah.
their communities that
Yeah.
they're working.
Yeah, each state's kind of got their own programs, task force and rescue teams and so on. And in Minnesota, for quite a while now, the state of Minnesota has put on some training. It's called 3 Echo.
And Cirrus.
And yeah,
I attended the Sears training.
yeah. So there's different stuff out there, but the state program is 3 Echo, and again, some communities we were talking earlier before the show do something a little bit different. The important thing is something's done. Here's the important thing: law enforcement, fire, and EMS have get together, and do some type of training.
Yeah.
Whether it's 3 Echo or Sears or whatever you want to put on it. Those 3 disciplines have to work together because we know they all have kind of a little bit different agenda. Law enforcement likes to take control of it, as it should be.
Yeah.
So again, I'd say it doesn't matter what program it is. You need to get some type of training. Even if it's just getting in your community, maybe it's a small community. We've traveled all through Minnesota with the 3E training, and the smallest towns, the biggest towns. It's starting to slow down a little bit, and we were talking earlier. I'd encourage people. I'm not selling it. It's not a. It's.
There's a disclaimer at the beginning of the show.
Yeah,
You're
okay.
good.
No, I got nothing to invest in it other than I think it's important.
Yeah.
I think it's really important. And I'll say it again. It's redundant, but probably the best thing that comes out of that is the 3 disciplines training together, and they learn a lot about each other. It's kind of interesting going to a small community in Minnesota, or any community, but especially some of the smaller ones, and we're all standing at a table doing a tabletop, and there's a cop, and there's a firefighter, and there's a medic or an EMT, and they realize, we can't talk to each other on the radio. How are we going to communicate?
Yeah.
We don't have your channels.
Which was part of the San Bernardino incident, that the article that we touched on about communication.
Yeah. So learning those things about each other, what the cops are like, well, I didn't realize fire could do that, or they have. In many of the communities, you're going to get 2 dozen firefighters there, and maybe 3 or 4 cops in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So they have to adjust how they do things a little bit differently.
So, and I'll ask you this, as discretionary as you want to put it.
Okay.
How much does ego play into individuals that work on a SWAT team, both paramedic and police officers? And if you can't even talk about it, we will switch topics.
We are so egoless that it's not funny. I think it's like anything else. I mean, how many medics do you know? How many cops do you know, or firefighters that have egos? I think it's the same.
Yeah.
It's a little bit higher speed, the way to put it. When you're on a tactical team, there's more training, there's more involvement.
Yeah.
The beauty of it for me is I've got to do and see things and be around people and meet people that I never would have met doing that. So ego, I think in public safety there's a bit of ego, and there's some pretty big egos, I think, on SWAT and stuff too around. But
some of that's related to expectations too. I mean, you get on the team, expectations of you can become a little bit higher too.
Sure.
And, that can sort of feed egos a little bit.
Yeah. Well, you're asked to do a lot. I mean, it's not just being a regular medic or a regular officer. It's the next tier of what's expected of you in public safety. So
right.
I could see expectations being raised in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. So do you want to let's talk a little bit about the articles that we touched on. So the big one, since we're already running really fast on time, we're going to talk about the San Bernardino incident, which the article is a tactical medicine after action report of the San Bernardino terrorist incident. And I won't touch on the whole thing because it's a very in-depth article, and we posted those articles on our Facebook page, so you can go through and read them, or you can visit our website and see what those references are for. But this particular article makes 2 very important lessons that are learned, and the second one is what I'm going to read through, and then I'll just kind of touch on the first one. So the second lesson that is learned, as stated in this article, is the contrast between SWAT paramedics and RTF paramedics. What's RTF, Nick?
Rescue Task Force.
So RTF paramedics was highlighted in 2 specific ways. First, as the event unfolded, it became evident that responding fire and EMS units were not accustomed to combined operations with law enforcement. Their corresponding equipment packages and communication networks were different from those of law enforcement responders. Furthermore, while clearly identified as an active shooter event by the 1st Patrol units, the initial setup closely followed that of an MCI. Tactical command post was established to the north and casualty collection area / treatment to the south. It is estimated that the south location was possibly within the blast radius of the IEDs left in the building. If this estimation was correct by definition, it means that the triage area was established in the hot zone. So let's talk about that a little bit. So probably a lot of confusion on that scene. We all heard this situation unfold on the news. Obviously, we don't have any personal experience with it. But in the event of these circumstances unfolding, chaos ensues, right?
Yeah.
And Alex and I have talked about this pretty at length, that we're all humans in public safety. And when it comes to circumstances that are beyond our normal everyday lives, hitting us right in the moment, everybody tends to, freak out a little bit, right? Which comes into your guys' point, which is why training is so important, because training means muscle memory. So when these circumstances arise, it's muscle memory, training kicks into gear, and boom, chaos is limited in that regard. That's a very military way of thinking. So this particular article touches on the triage area being set up in the wrong place. So talk to me about why that's a bad thing. For not only paramedics but patients that are being extricated from that situation, and why does that happen in a chaotic situation?
Well, and I would say first of all is the communication. So, I can't speak specific to San Bernardino, but if they're operating on different channels, they don't have each other's communications. That leads to problem number one, and oftentimes the biggest problem. They're not communicating with each other. Obviously, if we have our triage area in a blast zone and you get all these people maybe walking wounded, other injuries, and they're within that blast zone, you face a ton of problems.
Sure.
Not knowing, so, it goes back to that communication. So not knowing that there's maybe an ID inside. Sounds like from what I have read and what I've seen in different articles, there was a number of people, I think at one point, maybe 30 operators, 30 officers that had been in that same room where that IED was placed. Mm-hmm. It was a remote detonation IED, so it failed to explode. But, a number of people had gone in there, were, milling around doing their thing with no idea of that being in there.
Yeah.
In that active shooter trainings, we talk about looking for things that are out of place. So you go into a school where there's an active shooter and you see a backpack on the side of the hallway, that doesn't stand out.
Yeah.
But easily a backpack sitting there could be that IED.
Right.
Now you have a backpack maybe with the wires hanging out or something like that stands out to you. But oftentimes these things are not even noticed. So, that confusion plays into it. Obviously, we need to have that communication, make sure that we are, as paramedics, firefighters, whoever is setting up that triage area, you're doing it in a correct spot. Wind direction. So you're talking, if there is some sort of explosion or there's chemical agents, things like that, taking that into effect. And there's a lot to put into that.
I think one of the things we teach is we don't do triage. We don't do a triage point. We do a casualty collection point, which is
Sure.
more of a military term.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit different than a bus crash or a tornado hitting a building. There's a lot of threats, secondary devices, and so on.
Yeah.
Things like that can happen. So what we teach is it's got to be close enough because you're hauling these people out there by hand, but it's got to be safe enough. We teach getting out of the line of sight around a corner behind a big piece of apparatus or something like that, and and really.
I heard somebody's stomach.
Yeah. I think it's me. I'll confess. triage just takes time, and penetrating trauma, is you don't have the time. So it's casualty collection point. Get them there.
Yeah.
Get them in a vehicle. Get them out. Get them going. And that's what we teach a lot. So again, referring to this article, I wasn't there. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
This is a whole different cat than
Right.
when you get guys like that running around.
So I'll speak a little bit from my own personal experience. Those that know me best, and you guys know me very well. I don't like talking about my past military experience that much. But the number one thing that from my previous military training will tell me is that I was taking care of a perfectly healthy 21, 22-year-old males, right? In the event of chaos ensuing, I have a relatively good, healthy individual that I'm taking care of. That's not the case in public safety. And especially when it comes to an active shooter situation, that's not the case. Physiologically, all of our patients are very, very different. They're not in the peak perfect physical shape that you would find people in the military. So treatment, while very much the same in public safety and military, has to be a little bit differently. Some, 70-year-old patient that gets a gunshot wound to the chest might be completely different than a 21-year-old that gets a gunshot wound in the chest, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
So let's talk about the triage a little bit. There is Start Triage that's out there.
Yep.
Is that what you guys utilize on the team? Start Triage, or if at all?
Again, we don't really triage. We don't use the traditional triage because I think it's easy to forget the numbers, the start, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
And if you use that, you practice that, that's great. The simple triage that we use and teach is the Israeli method. When you're at the site and you're the first one in there, you do the typical, hey, are you okay? Can you hear my voice? Walk over here. And if you can't walk, those people get divided out or triaged by simply saying, if you can't get up and stuff, if you can hear my voice, raise your hand.
So how do you select patients in that triage form?
Okay.
Let's walk us through front to back
Yep.
on how it works.
Like
yeah.
I say, the front part is if you can hear my voice, raise your hand. And if I go to the first patient I see, come to, if they're not raising their hand and they've got a pulse and they're breathing, they go first. Why?
Because you can extricate them from the area.
Well, because they didn't raise their hand. Why? Well, they were unconscious.
Yeah.
They were confused. They couldn't hear those types of things. So, if you're raising your hand, you heard me. You understood what I said, and you're physically able to do it. That doesn't necessarily mean you're less injured than that person sitting in front of you. So
Sure.
that's what we use and teach. And from there. Again, it really depends on the community. We
Sure.
travel around the state, and
Yep.
if, people use a little bit different things. But what we really try to encourage is get people outside, take care of the ABCs, and get them in a vehicle. Mm-hmm. Okay, get them in a vehicle and start heading towards definitive care as best you can.
Sure. So, Nick, do you want to touch on Start Triage? Because I'm going to tie this back to our question to the community earlier in this week. How does Start Triage work?
Oh man, I hate Start Triage.
It's probably a juxtapose given that your position on a SWAT team. But yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, in my daily activities at work and on the ambulance, we, I truly would say I don't really use Start Triage. I use kind of my own in my head. I will triage based on kind of like what Mark said. You get the people who can talk, who can respond to you. Those are kind of your greens or your walking wounded. You get those people out right away. Anybody who's not up and moving, you can address at that point. I think one thing that we run into a lot is people think they can't walk.
Yeah.
And, that's something we deal with in active shooter trainings too. So you have somebody who you then approach and you start talking to, and they say, maybe they got a gunshot wound to their arm. Okay, your legs are good. Get up. We'll help you up. We'll get you moving. So, you're not worrying necessarily at that point about yellows. You're getting those people out. As far as, your more critical patients, those are going to be the people that you're going to tag as like a red. Obviously, with our triaging blacks, we're just going to step over. We're going to move past.
Sure. So what constitutes a patient being triaged black in Start Triage?
No pulse, not breathing.
No pulse,
no
not
signs
breathing.
of life.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And again, you're dealing with potentially a lot of patients, so you don't have time to get down there and really do a lot. You can reposition their airway, see if they take a breath. If they take a breath, great, we'll get them moving.
Yeah.
But you're not going to risk a bunch of other people by spending a bunch of time on somebody who, there's never going to be CPR started on those people. So it's rapid. I mean, it's rapid triage. You're moving through patient to patient, and you have to. As you arrive and you're triaging these people, you might be the only one, you and your partner might be the only people there that are doing this. So you might have to triage 6 people, you might have to triage 46 people.
So, excuse me. So the number one killer in MCI situations or active shooter situations is interthoracic injury or chest injury of some kind, right? So
you've been doing your research. 'Cause that's pretty new. That's fairly new in the last couple of years.
Yeah. So I mean, so that is what is going to kill your patient, like I mentioned before, in the next couple minutes, right? So that's the number one thing that we need to treat right away. The quiz that I put up earlier this week purposefully neglected that kind of injury, right? It was a off-duty officer that had a wound to the upper right thigh and some superficial lacerations and some other things. And then you have another patient that is what officers tell you in cardiac arrest. But again, and I talked about this before in the last video that Alex and I made, I'm purposefully right. I don't just come with these quizzes out of nowhere. I'm purposefully writing.
It's disappointing.
I'm writing them in such a way that is challenging people's thought process, and every single sentence and line that I'm putting in there is put there for a reason. So in this particular question, it says that officers are telling you that the second patient in this quiz had stopped breathing. Doesn't tell you that they're in cardiac arrest. Doesn't tell you that they don't have a pulse. And I would say about 50% of the community said, he's dead, he's a black, go to the officer. And the other 50% of the community said, well, there's 2 of you. And again, I don't specify if it's the medic or medic EMT. There's 2 of you, so you should be able to treat both patients. I had some comments about putting both patients in the same rig and transporting to the... And it's such a fascinating thing to see people respond to that kind of a scenario because it is hypothetical, right? And we'd all like to think that we would respond in the ways that our brain has taught us, given that circumstance arising. But as we all know, chaos ensues and nothing really goes according to plan. So again, this ties back to our original question. If I'm on scene in that circumstance, a part of me is like, I'm going right to the officer.
Yep.
It's an off-duty officer. I'm going to go treat him, and then I'm going to check on the other patient. But the clinical side of us that we need to all remember is that we are there to provide care to everybody, regardless of what their background is, right? I mean, you don't see docs in the ER during a TTA that gets a couple patients bring in. You don't see them saying, well, he's not an officer, I'm going to treat the officer first.
Good point.
Right.
We have to keep an unbiased approach in our jobs in order to be the best clinicians that we can be. So while I understand some of the community in the comments talking about how I'm going straight to the officer, and I get that, I very much get that point.
And I think that's part of the difference between in-house and on the street, because we work with cops. You work with cops every day.
That's right.
You know who that cop is. It's Tom.
That's right.
That's part of it too.
Yeah.
So.
Which was another point that I put in there. Initially, I had it as an officer, and I changed it to an off-duty officer to get that distinction about maybe you don't know this person is who it is. So again, it's part of our job that we have to be unbiased. Docs do it in the ER, and again, they have a hospital that surrounds them in a patient. They're not there on scene, and they're detached from it to a certain extent. But keeping an unbiased approach in those circumstances, I think, is what we need to do. Would you guys agree?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think it goes back to what I was saying. It's you wouldn't do it any different coming out of your truck on the street. You shouldn't do it any different if you're in a tactical environment. So.
Yeah. So let's touch on a little bit of the training that goes into being a SWAT paramedic. Did you have any questions? You were writing stuff down.
I am. I'm writing stuff down. I got lots of things.
Are you writing stuff down on how we used to do when we used to interview people, and you would slide us the notes of what you used to write?
I don't know what you're talking
Oh,
about.
okay. Sorry. Yeah, that's right. Well, okay. Well, let's come back to training. Why don't you hit on?
Well, I just wanted to. You made a comment earlier about the number one cause of preventable death. Okay, and TCCC has taught us for years, and we've been teaching that the number one cause of preventable death on the battlefield is exsanguination from extremities, and that's where the tourniquets came from.
Sure.
And it's very true on the battlefield, and that's why we've been teaching it in kind of active shooter and stuff too. But there's been some research in the last couple of years has proven that that's just not the case. The number one cause of preventable, if you had to pick number one cause of preventable death is that thoracic injury, and so therefore the treatment for that is needle decompression. And we're kind of running into a thing now as we teach, if that's the truth. So we start teaching EMTs and first responders needle chests and stuff like that. So that's a very interesting debate there.
Yeah.
So yeah, and the reason for folks, on the military side, the reason that you don't see the thoracic injuries and stuff is because of body armor,
right.
Helmets. Technology is so far advanced, but what's out there and what's free and what's getting hit is the extremities.
Yeah.
And obviously in the civilian side, that's not the case.
Yeah. And again, that's part of the medicine that evolves. And again, these are unfortunate circumstances. It's not easy to talk about the active shooter that is occurring in 2018 for anybody. But it is teaching public safety. It's teaching the medical community how to save lives in the next circumstance that arises.
Yeah, there's the whole push now, Stop the Bleed.
Yeah.
That's a nationwide program, and we're just starting up in this area as well, teaching the layperson how to put a tourniquet on, how to pack wounds, and
right.
and for years it was just the fire extinguisher on the wall, and then there's the AED, and now you're going to see tourniquets and things.
Public CPR, and now it's
and which is kind of a sad statement in a way of our society where it's going, but it is what it is. We've got to keep moving forward.
That's right.
People have to accept that.
Yeah. In order for public to be successful and people to be successful is to adapt to their surroundings. And part of the unfortunate thing in 2018 is that regular civilians are going to have to adapt to the surroundings that the world is presenting us with, and that is the active shooter. And you're right, it is sad, but that's the world we live in. Yeah, so I'd rather be better prepared for that than
right. And I don't want my grandchild and even my 20-year-old kid and stuff have to have to know those things, but they have to know those things now. And it's easier for us. I mean, we see it. We're on the street seeing it, or maybe even for a more experienced adult and stuff. But the next generation, it's completely different for them.
So let's touch back on some of the training that goes into being a SWAT paramedic. What is some of the training that you've received, and talk about it at the very beginning, because you don't come from a military background or law enforcement or anything like that. So you were kind of new going into that side of things. Talk about how that training works for you, or how it did.
Yeah, so we actually have a basic SWAT course starting on Monday, so a couple days from now. And we were just over at the local college talking to some of the EMT students and law enforcement students, and training came up, and so we were talking to them about it. And I always go back to Mark, who we call Master Splinter, who sort of taught us a lot of stuff.
Hold on, hang on. Master Splinter?
Master Splinter.
Is that public knowledge, or did it just become public knowledge?
I think it just did.
Yeah. So Master Splinter from like
4 Ninja Turtles.
Okay, that's fantastic. Yeah. So,
and I just want to say I'm a little disappointed you didn't do the rapid fire.
Oh, I'm coming back to it. I was thinking about it about halfway through. Don't worry, I'm coming back to it. Yeah. So
he kind of gave us our 4 medics on the SWAT team. He gave us kind of the Tutila version of a TCCC. Which is great. We talk about, treating officers, treating innocent bystanders, hostages, things like that. As Mark had talked about before, that is such a small part of being a tactical paramedic. Probably the biggest thing for me was when we went through the basic SWAT course back in 2014, realizing how big teamwork was. And, so we did a lot of teamwork. We trained with, I think there was maybe 8 other officers that went through basic SWAT with our 4 medics. We trained everything the same. We shot with them. We did everything the same as them. Realizing how big that teamwork was, which, working on an ambulance, you have some teamwork, but really, as soon as you get that patient in the back of your ambulance, it's your patient.
Yeah.
You don't have that teamwork in EMS, really.
Right.
So that was a huge part for me. I really found that to be very interesting. It was a lot of fun. It was probably one of the toughest weeks I've been through, but it was a lot of fun.
Did you get MREs?
No.
Oh, you didn't?
No, we didn't eat MREs. And we got to go home and sleep in my own bed at night.
Yeah.
But, it was long days. Yeah. But, you realize that teamwork. And then after we were done, we realized that, in talking with Mark, that really that trauma, care is really a small part. Mm-hmm. Kind of that sports medicine aspect, the health and wellness of your operators becomes a huge part. And in talking to those students today, I was talking to them about the most commonly used part of all my equipment is a pouch that sits right on my abdomen that has Advil, Tylenol, really the basic things. And
Sure.
I give out a lot of Advil and Tylenol to our operators.
Yeah.
Hydrating our operators during really hot days, making sure people are staying warm during the winter. And there's a lot to it. Really bringing in that sports medicine aspect.
Yeah.
And that's become a huge part. So beyond kind of that initial training, we train really well with our team. We integrate, we train with them. We are an integral part of every one of our trainings. This last month, so during our April training is our range day. We shoot with our operators. We train on all the weapons so that we're comfortable with them. Mm-hmm. And, they feel that we're the same as them.
Yeah.
So
in the event that you would have to pick up that weapon and use it for yourself or
Yep.
to protect others.
Yeah. Feeling comfortable if an officer does go down, feeling comfortable that I can secure that weapon.
There goes Mark again with his phone.
I got the volume down. I figured that out. You young whippersnapper.
Yeah.
Oh, there's the second one. Yeah.
Yep.
I knew no good would come from them city folks and their flying machines.
So feeling comfortable with those weapon systems. And then also, like you alluded to, the fact that, could a case happen where officers go down and I'm able to pick up a weapon and protect not only myself, but those other officers too.
Yeah. You guys don't have a 40 mic, do you?
We do.
You do? Really?
And we got a Deuce, a double launcher.
Oh, my goodness.
Yep.
How about a Barrett?
No. I
don't
wish
have
we
a
did.
I've got one.
Dude, we do have one, yeah.
Nick Barrett.
Have you
Yeah.
ever shot one of those?
I have actually.
I've never shot one. Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Did it break your shoulder when you did it?
No, they're set up for
Sure.
the recoil and stuff. So
Yeah.
I have. You want to keep going on education?
Yeah, go for it,
There is
yeah.
some. I just want to talk. There is some formal schools. There's a ton of them out there now. And if people are thinking about getting into tactical EMS, I'd encourage that. The thing that I encourage is they're soup to nuts. I mean, do your research. Go out on, you can Google it. There's, like I say, every state, every place has got tactical EMS schools. Minnesota has one. It was up at Camp Ripley in Swan. Mm-hmm. It was a school that myself and some guys from Minnesota started.
That's right. I remember that.
Yeah, it's been. There's some different guys running it now. But do your research. If you go into a school and it's like, hey, yeah, we're going to shoot belt-fed machine guns for 3 days and rappel out of helicopters. That's great, and that's a lot of fun. But it's not really tactical EMS.
Yeah.
Nick kind of alluded to. It's the stuff we don't do as medics. Orthopedic injuries, I need to relocate a knee, things like that. Wound care. You may have an extended operation. Keeping the athlete in the game or keeping the operator in the fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I clean and close this wound for a short period of time so we can finish this up, or does that guy have to go to the hospital and get that stitched up right now? Things like that.
Yeah.
So it's not beyond the normal day-to-day stuff.
So I've been taught how to suture. Now, if I did it today, I probably would make a mess of it. Do you do you think stuff like that, like replacing a dislocation of a knee or suturing or stuff, do you think that stuff has a place in regular EMS?
I do.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff I got came from wilderness medicine because it's extended care, and I think there's certainly places for that. Probably some docs out there that are getting tense right now, but I think relocating a shoulder, or a knee, something like that. Probably not wound care,
Sure.
things like that, obviously. But I think there's some things that we could and should be doing on the street.
So there was a recent concert that we all know of, again, and I won't mention it by name, but that we were all out at. And Bjorn, our previous guest, our previous doc, who's going to be on the show again, responded to a dislocated knee with me. And when I first got to it, I was like, I can put that back in. That's not a big deal. But then I was like, well, it's not. Hang on, it's not in our current standard of practice. So I called Bjorn, and Bjorn literally walked down to, and again, if he's listening right now, he'll know what I'm talking about. He walked down to this patient, and like within 5 seconds, was like, oh, I'm gonna put it back in and put the knee back in. And I was like, why can't we do that? Which I think is kind of funny. And again, there's a lot that goes into expanding medicine in that regard. But I just saw Bjorn put in a knee in like 5 seconds. And I wish more of that was commonplace in EMS. Maybe it will be in the future.
Yeah, and I think there's a place for some of that. And the reason I bring it up, there's some, and depending upon, I work with a bigger city SWAT team right now, and you're not going to be more than 5 or 10, maybe on the outside, 15 minutes away from a hospital.
Sure.
But I worked with the state team for quite a while, and you could be in on the border of Canada. You could be, you could be a long way from definitive care. So some of those things are important.
Yeah.
Riding in a horseback, right?
You whippersnappers.
Oh, that's number 2. How many did you need to get into?
I think just
the one?
The more the better, but
all right. I'm going to do some rapid fire. We'll come back. We'll touch on a couple articles, and then we'll wrap it up. So rapid fire, before I do anything else, Nick, please tell me, how big of a fan of Star Wars are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
This is where I do this, right?
Oh, my God.
I say I love Star Trek.
Alex is like, he's going to start calling me right
Yeah.
now. Get him off the show.
I got little kids, and I actually was correct on a Star Wars question.
Really?
So the guy with who's black and red in one of the fairly recent.
Kylo Ren.
There you go.
Okay. I am in the minority in this group right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So
what are you guys talking
my
about?
6-year-old was saying, the red and black guy that's in the newest Star Wars. And I said, that's not the newest Star Wars. And so and this is the day and age we live in, he goes over to the TV, he grabs a remote, and he does a little voice thing, and he says, Star Wars. And he starts cycling through all the Star Wars. And he says, right here, Daddy. Wow. That was, I don't know, 6 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
I have seen maybe 4 of them. The first 3 for sure, and then I think maybe the next 1 or 2.
You give me a lot of crap for him when we're at work.
Yeah.
Yeah, he purposefully plays on our devotion to Star Wars.
I love the Ewoks.
Yes.
I had the Ewoks when I was a kid, the little Ewok village. And
Yeah.
Yeah, but did you guys see the original one in the theater?
Well, I wasn't alive.
Yeah.
I was like -5.
That is my
yeah.
Star Wars stigma. That is my thing. I saw the first one.
You did?
Yeah, for several in the theater.
You take your kid to that one?
How old were you when you first went to it?
I don't know, when did it come out?
77?
I'm kind of mad at myself that I don't even know when the original came out. Yeah, 77. No. Yeah, 77. Oh my God.
Man, am I a huge Star Wars fan.
Alex is going to yell at me. Yeah, in the 70s.
I think it was 77 because when we were
I was
looking at
probably
it
your
with my kid.
age.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
How old do you think I am?
I'm just kidding.
Oh. I do that quiz a lot with Jason or that statement a lot at work. How old do you think I am? Jason's 71. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know how old he is. All right, so next question. So we have a playlist that we do for this podcast, if you didn't know, which a lot of our community have added to this most recent playlist. What is your most favorite album or song related to your job, Mark Titilla?
Related to my job?
Yeah. What helps you the most? Or what do you like the most? What do you like driving Code 3 to, if you could play it?
Thunderstruck. AC/DC.
Okay.
And I have never played that going Code 3 in my vehicle, ever.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
Never done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I was going to say like Metallica or something like that, but yeah, no, I like it. Thunderstruck by ACD.
AC/DC.
Yeah.
AC/DC, sorry. Yeah. It's going on the list. Go
Mine's
ahead.
probably Metallica 1.
Yes.
That is probably my favorite or one of my favorite songs.
Have you ever blasted it driving Code 3 before?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
See,
I
he's
have.
not afraid to say it.
Yeah.
With due regard and all that. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
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 I don't. Who's?
You don't know who Metallica... Oh, I was going to
do.
say. I was going to say.
I'm not a fan. Not a fan.
Oh,
So let's touch on a couple of the more articles just because we did mention them, and then we'll kind of close it out here since we're just over an hour. Already,
You know.
man.
that's right. Yeah, that's what Jeff said last week. Yeah, Jeff was like, "What, really?" So one of the articles talks about the psychological stress that comes into training with people during a simulated battlefield trauma training when they use live tissues versus high fidelity patient simulators. So the reason that I brought this article into play is because it talks about using tissue or animal labs for training as opposed to using the Fred the Head or the mannequin or whatnot. How have you guys seen, if at all, in your training? And Mark, I know that you have dealt with this specifically. How has that benefited operators and medics on a SWAT team in that's TCCC and whatnot in that kind of training?
Yeah, I was really fortunate I got to be involved. And actually, I had not read this article, and I found it really interesting because there was a study with the military and the University of Minnesota. It was about a 3 or 4 year study, and they did just that. We would go out and some special forces guys and other disciplines would go out and do a 2-day course, and they would train with those guys, the combat medics, on either live tissue or high fidelity sim, and these were some very, very cool.
Yeah.
The University of Minnesota's got the sim lab. If you ever, or sim portal, if you ever get a chance to go there, do it. And then we would come in and we would test them, either test them on live tissue or the simulation. And personally, I can speak personally. And the idea of the study was to which works best, and basically it was kind of both work best.
Sure.
And the thing that I found is working on live tissue. I don't, go into any detail on that, but you have a life, albeit it's not a human life. It's real blood, it's real life, and that's psychological. That kind of hits you.
Chaos sets in.
Yeah, well, it can, and we tried to create an environment that was chaotic. It was blacked out. There was a lot of noise and lights and flashing and things like that. Kind of a combat setting. And that's very psychological. Although the anatomy obviously is not realistic. Packing wounds, doing things like that. It's like, okay, but the psychological factor.
Sure.
And then the high fidelity, the really good sim. With legs missing, blood spurting out, an actor is being part of it. Is a half human, half sim.
Yeah.
Very effective. Now you got the proper anatomy and stuff, and real enough to, if you were just walking in and didn't know what was going on, which these guys and gals were, really stressful. And that was part of the study. They would take enzymes. Testing and stuff, checking pupillary responses and stuff. So I guess to answer the question is that a useful training and stuff? Absolutely, both.
Yeah.
Both. And I know on the civilian side, live tissue is a pretty controversial thing and pretty hard to do.
Sure. lot that goes into it behind the scenes that we don't know about. Yeah.
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 But real good sim, I think is real worthwhile.
Yeah.
We had the opportunity to we do a training with the Norwegian Army, that exchange program with the Minnesota National Guard and the Norwegian Army, the NOREX program. It's going to be happening again this June. And when I was up there a year, almost 2 years ago now, at Camp Ripley, they have a medical training facility that's new called the Mystic. And that is their medical training facility. They have some of these high fidelity training spots. And when you go in and you watch this, so I watched the first couple from their control room. And I watched these people come in, and it's very realistic. So they dark it out. There's strobe lights. It's really loud in there. It's simulating a battlefield. And then you have to find your patients, and they have these mannequins that are bleeding. They have limbs missing, and it was really cool. So I watched a couple of them, and they're like, "Do you want to do it?" And I said, "Absolutely. This is a great opportunity."
Yeah.
So I went in there fully knowing what's happening, and as soon as I got in there, I could feel my heart rate go up, and I'm like, "Holy crap!" Everything that I had seen went out the window.
Yeah.
And you just rely back on your training. And in the end, my patient died. He had an inguinal wound, so I'm in there trying to hold it, and you realize how realistic that is.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
It's a really good experience. And we're going to have that for our basic SWAT, or not for basic SWAT, for our annual SWAT training up at Camp Ripley this year too. So
That's
it's going to be
awesome.
an awesome experience, not only for our medics, but also for all of our operators are going to get to go through it. So
one of the things that we do, as Nick, you know this, and Mark, you know this too, is we do a cadaver lab at our service that we work for, which of all the training that we do with our medical direction, I would say by far and large, the cadaver lab is the most beneficial. So one of the docs who is going to be on here in a few weeks, we have a very special episode. I'll touch on that at the end. I was doing the cadaver lab with them, and we were going through the whole process, and we, as a group, there's probably 10 of us sitting there. And they were getting ready to say, all right, so we're going to do a surgical airway. Who wants to do the first surgical? And I pushed my coworkers out of the way to get to the front because I wanted to cut into that live tissue before anybody else had at that point,
right,
to better myself intellectually and better my education. And one of our other medics beat me to it, and it was right in front of me. But again, extraordinary training, invaluable, and I think all medics should go through that kind of training.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of different. I did the that military, and we used certain animals, and there's been sheep labs and those things, and I've been through all those and stuff. But you're right. I mean, that particular cadaver lab is awesome.
And one of the things that our one of our medical directors did, again, who will be on the show, said, "All right, we're turning the lights off now." And turned the lights off, and then grabbed a blanket and put you in a position where you would have to utilize your skills such as intubation, chest decompression, those other things like that, in an environment that you're not used to, like a well-lit back of an ambulance or an ER. And everybody seemed to struggle with that, myself included. And he's probably laughing right now if he's listening. But again, that's part of the muscle memory that comes with education and training that we all have to do, and not just as SWAT paramedics, but as paramedics in general. That in the event that we are given these chaotic situations, that we could try to eliminate the human part of our brains and just fall back to muscle memory. Because it not only serves us well, but it serves our patients well too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other thoughts before we go? Yeah,
I was just going to say, to that point, we talk a lot. We in tactical medicine, we train a lot more than we operate. The service I'm with, we do about 12 call-outs per year, and we do 12 trainings a year. Trainings last a lot longer sometimes. So we always say, train how you operate. If you train how you operate, you're going to be comfortable when you get out there, and you're gonna work the way that you've been training. So that's such a huge portion of that, and
Yeah.
and to treat your trainings the way that you're gonna be in real life, and that's true for across the board in the medical field.
Totally agree.
Yep.
Yeah. Before we go, unless you had something else you wanted to say there, Mark.
Yeah, I do.
Go. Yeah, I'll save this. Yeah.
I'll drag this out as long as I
Oh,
no.
please,
No,
yes.
something,
No, absolutely.
I think one thing. No, I don't think. I know one thing that as long as tactical EMS has been around, it's been a long, long time. And I think it's really misunderstood by the rest of EMS.
Yeah.
If I could tell you every time, I come in, wherever it's been, and I'm around other medics and stuff, and I got a uniform on or something, they're like, "Hey, I didn't see you there, Mr. Cammy Jammy," and hut, the whole thing. And I think it's really misunderstood. And I think I would encourage medics in general, and just EMS folks, get with some of the tactical guys. Ask them if they can come out to the training and see what they do. It's not a paintball game. It's not an ego thing. I think these people in law enforcement. I know these people in law enforcement on these teams. They're up against the wall and they're doing a lot of stuff that no one else would do.
Yeah.
And I think they deserve to have our support there. So,
Absolutely.
and that's why I do it.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm just going to touch on this real quick. This helmet right here, this is for Alex. Hang on, I gotta get it in. I gotta get it into view. Alex, our guests tonight are super disappointed that you're not here,
Crushed.
and they think that you should have skipped your thesis to come to the show.
yeah.
No,
I mean, what's a thesis? You can do that anytime.
yeah. So maybe
Zero
we'll try to
chance
get
you
it back.
poke your eye out with that helmet on.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, but we'll get more helmet wearing from Alex.
Yeah.
We're closing in on about 8,000 people that have liked or followed the page on Facebook, and we're just when I last checked, over 25,000 downloads on all of our podcast sites.
That's
so
crazy.
that includes iTunes and Spotify and everything else. So closing in on 30,000 downloads on that
That's
regard.
Awesome. That's awesome. Congratulations, you guys. You guys are
absolutely.
doing a great job.
Well, again, and Alex and I wouldn't be here if we didn't have the guests that we have. We've had people from all across the board come onto the show to give us their expertise, which is why we're so fortunate to have the show that we do. If it was just Alex and I sitting here talking for 13 episodes, people would have turned us off a long time ago because we would have been talking for an hour about Star Wars and Infinity War and everything else. So again, we can't thank you guys enough for being here. You guys are what really makes the show, to be honest. We're just kind of a host to you. But I will touch back on that a little bit. Why don't we go ahead and sign off, since we're at about an hour and almost 20 minutes now. So
No way.
yeah, that's right. So Mark, go ahead and sign off. Then we'll give it to Nick, and then I'll finish it up.
I'm signing off. This is me. Adios, you.
That was simple.
You whippersnappers.
Oh man,
Whippersnappers.
how many times did you need to get that in?
I think I did 3 or 4.
You did 3.
My wife told me I had to do that on
Yeah.
the air. So
Well, you got you got it in. It was
yeah,
good.
cool. No, thank you very much. And if you're an EMS, you got to watch this show. Seriously.
We appreciate it.
Yeah. I would just like to say thanks for having us on. It's been a great opportunity for us to come and talk about tactical EMS.
Hope we can come back.
It's not something that's
Yeah.
always talked about. There's a lot of good information out there. There's a lot of good people that are doing it, and happy to come in and talk about it. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you both for being here. So we have a very special show coming up in a couple weeks. Now, we do have episode 14 and episode 15, which are coming in the next couple weeks. After that, on June 8th, we have a very special show. I'm not going to divulge a ton of information. I'm not going to divulge a ton of information to it. Just know that there's going to be about 6 guests in this room that we're sitting in right now. Alex and I are probably going to make a fool of ourselves trying to interview them, but we're mostly just going to shut up and let them talk for about 2.5 hours straight.
I don't think you guys will get a word.
I don't
in
think
there.
we will either. It's going to be welcome to the... Okay, go. And that's
Yep.
it. So, again, June 8th is the Season 1 finale. We are super excited for it. All of our guests have been invited back, so we have about 90% of our guests have agreed to come back, and literally they're just going to sit in the room over there and just drink and watch Alex and I make a fool of ourselves for a couple hours.
What could be more fun?
That's right.
Right.
So if you guys want to come back, you are invited to do so.
Absolutely.
So we have that, and then a couple more episodes in season 1. Then we take a small break for the summer. We'll see how this all kind of marinates, and then we'll come back in season 2. A big thank you from Alex and I for everybody that has subscribed to this point and has watched us and up until this point. Your support is invaluable, and again, the show would not be what it is without you. So we thank you, and that's all I got for you this week. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Thank you.